Technical skills for me, I feel like they are easier to learn and it's easier to find an individual that has the technical know-how. We can watch, some YouTube, take some courses and learn how to click on a screen and drag and drop fields and write some code. And I'm not, saying that those things come easy, but I do feel like it's a little bit easier for individuals to learn that than having let's say a good personality, right? Or somebody
Mm.
that you can talk to and can take feedback and can present well or has good communication skills.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Scientist Show. Today, we have Kate Strachnyi. Kate is the founder of Dedicated, providing brand amplification for companies focused on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science. She's also the founder of Dedicated Academy, delivering training on data visualization best practices. She's delivered several courses on data storytelling, dashboard techniques, and visual best practices. Additionally, Kate is the host of the Dedicated Conference and Dedicated On-Air podcast. Oh, that's a lot. Kate was appointed as the LinkedIn top voice of data science and analytics in 2018 and 2019. She's a mother of 2 girls and enjoys running ultra marathons, wow, and obstacle course races. She published 4 books and is writing another one on the color of storytelling. Welcome, Kate.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah. So let's start with your career. How did you get into data analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. I love sharing this story because it brings me back to the good old days. It was about 2013, 2014 when I actually fell in love with data. And it happened at the same time that I was expecting my first child. It all sort of happened by accident because I was working at that time in risk management, regulatory compliance, consulting for financial services institutions. And the work, it was really interesting, but it really required a lot of hours, a lot of travel, and a lot of unpredictability of where am I going to be tomorrow. And expecting my first child, a thought popped into my head, and the thought was, I want to see this child grow up, and I want to be present. And so that sort of launched my new venture of finding an opportunity to work from home. Now, if you're listening to this in 2021, then you're probably comfortable sitting at home already, and most of the people I know actually work from home. But in 2014, this was not the case. It was not easy to find a work from home gig, especially if you wanted to be paid well and have a career that you really enjoyed. So I started looking internally in the company I was working for. And after several months of searching, asking, applying, I ended up getting an opportunity as a data analytics insight strategy manager. Had no clue what that meant, never played with data before, never analyzed data or visualized data, but I knew it kept me home 29 out of 30 days of the month. I only had to come in once a month. To me, I'm like, sold. I will do whatever. I will learn this data thing. And, it was probably the first week or so that I started playing with data in Tableau that I truly fell in love with it. And I decided, this is going to be my new thing. So I sort of went fully under the water and tried to learn as many things about data analytics, data science as possible.
Yeah, that's a great story. So before you get started in data analytics, what were you working on before?
So I was consulting financial services institutions in risk management, regulatory compliance issues. So to break it down for people not familiar with that space, picture a big, large foreign bank and picture regulators. And basically, we were called in to help the banks address any issues that the regulators presented. So, for example, if one bank got in trouble for not having the right granularity of data that they're reporting every quarter, our company was brought in to help respond to the regulators, sort of write a letter that says, here's how we're going to help you improve and do better. And then more times than not, we'd also be hired to really put those policies and procedures in place. So it was fun. It was more fun than I'm making it sound right now because we were able to go in there and really help these big institutions. So it was a really great learning experience for me.
Yeah. So when you get into data analytics, did you have any background in math or statistics?
Not exactly. So my undergrad degree was in finance and investments with a focus on communication.
Mhm.
I wanted to be able to present better. And then I actually started an MBA right after my undergrad. So I was 21 years old and decided I need to get an MBA for no reason other than I wanted to see. I actually blame my husband because he got an MBA and he's like, "Oh, you don't know how to like get an MBA." He said something stupid, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, one night I applied for the MBA program, signed up for the GMAT." He's like, "You are crazy." Anyways, I got into the school I wanted. I passed, got a good grade on GMAT and everything, completely for no reason. Ended up taking two courses, marketing and statistics. Got a 4.0 GPA. Those were the only two courses I took until I realized I really don't want an MBA. Why am I here? I already
Yeah.
had a good full-time job that I enjoyed, and this was sort of more of a distraction than beneficial to me in my career at the time.
Yeah.
But yes, that was my, I guess, background in statistics, is just taking that one grad course.
Mhm. Wow. So yeah, you already proved to your husband, hey, I can get an MBA. So done.
I can get in at least. That's yes.
Yeah. Nice. So a lot of people worry about getting into data analytics without a degree in data science, math, or computer science. I think your story is very inspiring. You basically learned Tableau and analytics largely on your own, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I took a lot of courses via YouTube. So they're not really courses. I basically,
Yeah.
when I would get stuck, I would either Google it or go on YouTube or ask a friend. And what really helped me along my journey is as I started learning Tableau, it's probably one of the, like in the first month or so of me trying to learn this, I started posting about it on LinkedIn. And
Mm.
that's really when my sort of LinkedIn career began as well, is when I started saying stuff like, "Hey guys, I'm studying for this Tableau desktop certification, taking it next week." That was probably my post. It was as simple as that. And a couple of people posted a few suggestions like, "Here, you can practice with these questions," or "Here's a good resource." And it opened up my eyes to the power of this community, right? Where people actually want to help each other. And that sort of kept me coming back to LinkedIn right after that experience. But yeah, I learned it generally on my own through practice.
Hmm. Yeah. So having a community is definitely helpful. So when you learned Tableau, what are some mistakes you made that you can share with us so people can avoid on their learning journey?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake I made was using the default settings. And nothing against the default settings on in Tableau. I think they do a pretty good job at visually displaying information with a couple of clicks. I think that's what makes them so popular, right? You just drag, drop, double click, and you've got yourself a chart or a dashboard. But I think the biggest lesson I learned was to take the time, even if it's 3 to 5 minutes, to really customize the visual to make it look a little bit better. I think it's those
Mm.
tiny little steps that we take to visually improve on visualizations and dashboards that just make them stand out, make them pop.
Yeah. And in your definition, what is a good dashboard? What's a good visualization?
Ooh, that is super subjective because some people might
Yeah, I
think,
want subjective opinion from you.
yes, okay, I'll tell you. My subjective opinion is it has to be as clean and simple as possible. For me, that makes a good dashboard. A good dashboard is something that when your target audience sees it, they know exactly what it is that they're looking at. They don't need you to stand there and explain, well, this bar chart means this, this, this. And when this goes up, that means bad or good. They should be able to see this just by looking at the dashboard. No explanation needed. So I guess for me, good equals simple.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of times we tend to put all the metrics on the dashboard, make it very busy. We think this is being informative, but this is actually very overwhelming for the stakeholder.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. And so going back to visualization is alone. So why can't we just present some tables, write a paragraph with statistics? And why do we have to do visualization?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So data visualization makes things a lot easier for humans. We are good at reading pictures. I think even as children, we start reading books by just looking at pictures. And we're also better at engaging with pictures and remembering pictures than we are, but looking at words and numbers. And I know there are some people probably listening that would say, "Oh no, I'm much better at just reading a paragraph," but there's definitely research behind this that says that pictures are just visually a lot more powerful than just text. So if you're trying to get a message across as a data analyst, a data storyteller, or a business professional that just really wants to put some data out there, visualizing it can help your audience really understand what it is they're looking at and get the insight quicker. So if I were to just write a whole paragraph about, how apples are better than oranges and because and blah, 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 and give my reasons, versus if I gave you a picture of like a really big juicy apple and like an orange rotting, a tiny little orange rotting and green with, disgusting stuff all over it. Visually, you're like, oh, wow, apples are better. It's just something that it's so much easier for us to understand and remember.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the analogy. And also in my work experience, sometimes you have your idea of what is an outlier, but until you print it out, sometimes there's something unexpected. And without seeing it, you don't even know that pattern exists. Although visualized results cannot give you a conclusion of what the data is telling you, but it can help you form assumptions. And then you can use more advanced techniques to test it. So yeah, data visualization is definitely very important. Just like you said, it's very intuitive.
Right. Right. And to add a point on what you mentioned about outliers, it's also really great for, when you're trying to look at data quality at a high
Yeah.
level and you want to spot any fat finger errors where somebody added 2 zeros instead of 1. And now that number looks crazy and is like swaying all of your results. So visualizing it is a lot easier to find these outliers than if you were to look at a table, let's say with thousands of rows of records.
Right, exactly. Just imagine eyeballing all the Excel
I would
spreadsheets.
miss it. I would totally miss it.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about outliers and data quality in general. And I think that's actually one of the most important things in a data science workflow. So what are some of the best practices in making sure the data quality is good or detecting outliers?
Yeah, I think obviously best practice is to detect any data quality issues on the data collection side of the process, right? Because I always think about it in terms of water and pipelines. So you collect water here being data. If you collect clean water, it's going to go through your whole pipeline. It's likely going to remain clean, and then your businesses can drink it from the fountain perfectly, right? That's your data visualization. A lot of times, if your data collection processes are not basically put in place to collect clean data, or you have people entering data and making mistakes, if you don't have like a clean drop down menu, people just typing in whatever they want, that ends up providing you with a lot more work to do down the line, right? So the next phase, data cleaning, data wrangling, all of that, it can start to lead to issues. So if you can't get your data cleaned in the beginning, it can go all the way through that whole cycle and then end up providing you with a poor data visualization, at which point you will catch it, right? You'll see, oh, look, there's a crazy outlier here. I wish we caught it all the way back there, so we didn't have to do all of this work in terms of cleaning it up or filling in the gaps where we didn't have any data. So if we can start from the beginning and collect clean data, that's the best case scenario. But definitely, as you're analyzing, looking for things that don't look right to you, doing a gut check to see if this is the data that we're expecting to get. Are these the results that we thought we were going to get? And if not, sort of taking another look and analyzing the data quality, make sure that it's in good shape and cleaning it up as you go. So then when you get to that final output, it should be based on somewhat clean data. I think perfect data probably doesn't exist. I think it's just in unicorn imagination. So
Right.
as good as you can get it is
Mhm.
how I'm going to phrase that.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when you start working, you notice there's no perfect data. Every data science project has data issue, and it's our job to making sense of the data when it's imperfect to see, okay, what is the risk of this analysis? What are some caveats, right? Um, so when you talk about collecting data for your dashboard, I think it's very important. So don't just take whatever data is sent it to you. Try to understand how the data was collected.
Yeah.
And when I work with data visualization and building dashboards, sometimes the data sent it to me, the schema changed or some requirement changed. So how do you make your dashboard flexible, or how do you work on those cases when there's constantly changing requirement, data, and metrics?
Yeah, I think it's helpful to work in a specific database that can handle those changes. So when I worked with Tableau, this is a couple years ago that I was really active in working with Tableau. We connected to all sorts of data sources. We connected to Salesforce. This was before Salesforce owned it. We connected it to a number of spreadsheets, just loose spreadsheets, huge ones that would
Yeah.
cause crazy issues, because even opening the spreadsheet would freeze your whole computer, right? So it was that size. And that definitely led to a lot of complexities. What helped us is working together as a team to have a set of processes that we would take. If you're trying to update this data, here are the list of steps that we're going to take, and we're all going to take the same steps. Because one thing we realized quickly was, let's say part of the steps was update the name of the column header to XYZ because the existing one is not going to go into Tableau correctly. So if we missed that one specific step, chances are the entire dashboard would break and we would have to kind of go back and redo things. So I think it was very important for us to follow this sort of recipe to success. I'm sure now these days that there are other tools available that can do a better job, maybe Alteryx that can do a better job at really connecting data sources. But for us at that time, the key part was working together as a team and reading that recipe step by step and following the instructions.
Yeah. And what are some frustrations when you're working on data visualization or analytics?
Personal frustrations, I think I personally enjoy it, right? So I love building visualizations. I can spend hours customizing, formatting, and making it look really good. I think my personal frustrations is when the data is not structured properly, right? So a lot of times, in order to create a specific chart, you need the data to be structured in a specific format. And what I personally disliked doing was that process of getting the data into the right shape. My personal favorite part was the creative side of things.
Yeah.
But I'm also aware we had people on the team who absolutely hated the creative side, thought that they don't know red from green or blue from orange, and they don't care either way. But they loved sitting down and making sure that the data was structured perfectly. So again, goes back to that team perspective, where if you're working on a team, finding the things that really give you energy, that you're really good at, and making sure that you let the team know that this is, guys, I love this. Give me all of your stuff that has to do with this. And then everybody ends up being happy because people are different. People like very different things.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of times we think, oh, as a data scientist, we need to work on everything on our own. I do believe whether you're a data scientist, you're a data analyst, you need to have the ownership mindset. I think we need to own the entire workflow, but owning it, overseeing it doesn't mean we have to work on everything on our own. Owning it meaning, for example, you found that perfect coworker that want to work on the things that you don't like and you collaborate with them, right? And you make sure what they deliver kind of goes into the pipeline of yours. So how do you communicate with your colleagues, or how do you work with other data professionals?
Yeah, I think it all begins with understanding what the business problem is that we're all trying to solve and make sure that we're all on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's really lots of Zoom meetings, lots of team calls to make sure that we're all on the same page as well. And then outlining a set of roles, responsibilities, right? Like team member A, you're going to make sure that the data sources are all exist to begin with, that we have all the
Yeah.
data. Team member B, you're in charge of making sure that we can create one big database where I can pull the data from it. And then my role generally was to make everything work and look pretty. And then we've got somebody else on the, closer to the business side who's going to sort of take a few passes at testing it and sort of playing with, a lot of times we build interactive dashboards and
Mm-hmm.
playing with it and trying to break it, right? Sort of like that beta tester. Let me see what I can do to break your entire dashboard. And then you
Yeah.
go back and make sure it doesn't happen when you're really using it. And sort of just keeping that cycle going is what worked for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That sounds like a really good workflow. You have a tester, right, to help give you feedback. So when you work on those type of dashboards, what if someone you collaborate with is not very helpful? For example, they're like, "Oh, I don't have time to prepare this data for you," or "I don't have time to get those data for you," or they think what you ask is not a priority, or they
Mm.
push back. So how do you sell your project or your idea?
Yeah, luckily the projects I worked on were very, very close to the like top executives in the organization. So it
Hmm.
was high priority for everybody, and we were all like, we know this is important. We all know we have to work on this. But there have definitely been times when people unintentionally would deliver the data in the wrong format. They
Yeah.
misunderstand the request. Sometimes personal things come up and they don't deliver the data in time.
Hmm.
So that definitely creates a sort of an obstacle in the process flow, right? And halts the progress for everybody else. What helped there is having several team members that are capable of doing that other task, even though they're not completely responsible for it. So, for example, even though I disliked doing the data joins and all that stuff, that
Yeah.
doesn't mean I can't do it, right? So
Right.
making sure we sort of cross train each other, that in some cases I knew if I was on PTO or something, I was not available for one reason or another, I trained a couple of other people on how to update the dashboard. They
Hmm.
never had to do it unless I was out of office, and it was a simple task, but I realized I can't be the only one who knows how to do this because I want to be able to take time off, right? So I took it upon myself to train other people that can sort of cover for me when I'm out. And I think that's important for any of the roles, is making sure that you've got at least one or two other people in the company that can replicate what you do, um, if they really had to.
Yeah. And I think this is really about being a leader. You don't have to be a manager, but you need to have the mindset, hey, I shouldn't be the single point of failure, right? I shouldn't be the blocker of this whole process. And it's our job to, document, set up best practices. Even if something comes up, other people can take over our work.
Yeah, some people I think purposefully do this. I find this in more of like the older organizations where people have been there for several years and they're like, I don't want to teach anybody else because I've got job security. And I think that's
Mm,
the most ridiculous thing. Like,
yeah.
but I'm sure you've seen it as well, right? Like where
Yeah.
people have that one process that they're in charge of and they don't
Hmm.
want to share it with somebody else because they want to make sure that they're the only ones that can do it. I came from this as a more from a selfish perspective where I enjoy being able to take time off whenever I need to. And I want to make sure somebody else can cover so I don't have to be there to do that. But in the long run, it helps the entire team as well when you've got other people that can keep the process moving forward.
Right. And also from the perspective of a manager, your manager really want a project to be successful. So they want to see you also be a leader, setting up those best processes.
Yeah.
And instead of you're just holding on to your own knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a great mindset. And you mentioned you work with a lot of top executive. Can you tell us what is it like to work very closely with them, especially what are some challenges?
I think it's that constant desire to impress them, right? When you're
Mhm.
working with the top people, especially if you worked in this organization a very long time and you've always seen them sort of in the leadership role, and now you're there supporting them. And I think it's this desire to succeed and show them like, hey, look what I can do, right?
Yeah.
And it went really well for me because the people I worked with, they really liked the output that they were seeing, and they've even asked to sort of roll out this data analytics across other divisions and departments. So we were able to do that successfully. Um, I think, the other thing to think about, and this is definitely personality driven, is people in leadership tend to have a little bit less patience, I'd say, less time, less patience. They've got a lot more on their plate. So making sure that the product that you're delivering is in its best state. So there's not much room for, here's a draft, let me know what you think. It's sort of got to look good from the
Mm,
get-go, so then they can actually see it without having to spend too much time, trying to understand what it is they're looking at.
mhm. Yeah, that's a great point. So how do you make it easy for executive to look at a dashboard?
First of all, you send them a link to it. That doesn't require any login, right? Making sure that they have a single sign-on capabilities, because once you send them a link and they have to start logging in, chances are they're closing that, moving on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So making it actually available. Sometimes it helps to even send screenshots or a PDF of that same information in case they're on their phone and they don't want
Mm,
to click that link, and clearly tell them what you want from them, right? So if you're asking for feedback, just put in big letters, ask, and then ask them what it is you want from them. This way, it's not just like, here's a dashboard, and they're like, okay, great. Tell them what this is going to be used for, tell them how they can use this. Sometimes, especially for maybe the not so tech savvy, getting on a call and letting them walk through the dashboard with their own computer while they're sharing screen, making sure that they know their way around.
mm,
What I noticed a lot of times is, we do this training or this walkthrough with slides or on our own laptop, and we have them looking along. Number one, chances are they're on their phone, staring
yeah.
not there but here. And the second thing is, they might think that they got this, and they think that they know exactly how to walk through this dashboard, click through things, and use the interactive features, filters, drop downs. But then when they open it on their own, they're like, wait, what was I supposed to do? It sort of becomes a little bit more distant because you didn't actually do it. So letting them play with it while you're watching and making sure that they really understand how everything works, I think, is really important.
Yeah, those are all great advice. And you also talked about telling a story using the dashboard, using data. Can you tell us what is data storytelling?
Yeah, so I'd say data storytelling is just like telling any other story that you would, except you're using data to sort of bring your audience along on the journey and really explain to them what's happening. So in the case of, talking about the impact of sales going up or down across different products or regions, yeah, you can talk about it, but a lot of times if you put a visual into your story, sort of a bar chart that shows, region A sold more than region B, it visually right away communicates to your audience like, oh, okay, we're, A is clearly better than B, and it sort of solidifies that information in their mind. Like we mentioned in the beginning of this talk, visuals just seem to work better than just text or words alone or numbers. So incorporating visuals into your storytelling and incorporating actual data points helps your audience really believe what you're saying a little bit
Mhm.
more, because you're like, here's the proof, here's what the data is telling us, right?
Yeah.
I'm not making this up, this is not my opinion.
Mhm.
So it makes them get to an action quicker, because now they're like, okay, why is region B underperforming, what do we need to do, right? What's the action we have to take, or how do we celebrate the fact that region A is doing so well, and what's the action we're going to take there, and how do we
Yeah.
emulate that in other places.
Mhm. Right. And when we try to tell story with data, sometimes we don't know, for example, why something is doing very well. We have a lot of assumptions, but those assumptions might not be true. So how do you make sure the data we tell is actually real stories instead of, there can be a million interesting things in the report or in the visualization, but maybe some of them are just coincidence. How do you know which stories are worth telling, which stories are noise?
Yeah, I think it starts with understanding the business. So having a very close communication with the key stakeholders of the data that you're working with. Um, because a lot of times you'd hear about a data story that was told that really was not relevant
Yeah.
to the audience. There's one example I like to use. It's a very smart PhD data scientist gets hired for some video game company, and he's off working for a couple of months doing all this crazy analysis, and he comes back with his data story, and the story was like, oh, this specific character in this video game has this special power that can actually beat all the other characters. And his audience, they're like, yeah, we made the game, like that's what we did on purpose, right? So he spent months of time and his expensive salary working on something that they didn't even care about. So I think starting with what does the business care about, what metrics are important to them, will help you get started on trying to identify what is interesting in the data that would be interesting for them. There's just because something is an outlier doesn't necessarily mean that this is something that the business should care about or does care about. So really getting an understanding of that domain, I'd say, is the first step in being able to tell a story that they would actually care about.
Yeah. I love the story you just told. So when you try to build a dashboard or tell a story, you mentioned it's good to understand the objective of the business. So what are some questions you usually ask when you try to understand their business problem?
Yeah, sometimes it's not even questions, it's just having a conversation and talking about what it is that keeps them up at night, right? What do they care about? So I'll give you an example. When I was working for a person who really managed different businesses, right? And what he cared about was, how do we make sure we hit the revenue goals for each of those businesses? So what I knew right away was we had to go back and think about, okay, here are the revenue numbers, but what's driving revenue? Well, we need to look at the companies that we are pitching. We need to look at how many wins we had, how many losses we had, and sort of making sure that we've got the data around the whole entire pipeline, so we can make predictions around how much revenue are they going to make. And if our forecasts are way under what the expectation was for that line of business, going back to the business and sort of helping them. So that was his mission, making sure that they all grew at a specific rate. And I understood that just by having a conversation and trying to understand what it is that this individual really cared about. Sort of asking, what is your success metric, right? What does success look like for you? What are you being rated on? A lot of times, whatever this individual is being rated on is going to be the metric that they care about most, and that's what you can see. What's the data that's driving this metric, and sort of keep going back and back until you get to the bottom of it. And then my job there was simply to visualize and show where the gaps might be between the forecast, and where we think we're going to end up at this point. And then coming up with some ideas for solutions on how do we actually grow those businesses.
Well, this is good if they know what they want, right? You can have a conversation with them. But a lot of times, sometimes business say, oh, I don't know what I want. I kind of vaguely have this idea. I want you to figure it out. So how do you handle those situations?
Yeah, welcome to one of my first projects in data analytics. I was given a data set that had, I don't know, maybe 1,000 columns, and that's just columns. The number of rows is just unreal. And the task I was given was, give me insights. And I'm like, insights, yes. Yeah. I could tell you zip codes. I could tell you about personality traits. I could tell you about, wins and losses. There was so much information I could have looked at. And at that point, if they really, really have no idea what they're looking for, I think what I started was reading the data as if I would read a book. So trying to read all the column headers and just get a sense of what is in those columns, getting a good baseline understanding of what data am I dealing with. Then trying to identify, do I even have data? So a lot of times we would have maybe interesting data points that we wanted to collect, but nobody really filled out that field, so we can't really report on it. And then really narrowing it down to maybe 5 or 10 different potential topics or areas that we could delve into, knowing which data we have and understanding sort of what's in there, proposing different things to the stakeholders and saying like, well, would it be interesting for you to know your top 10 clients? Or would it be interesting for you to know the reasons why we lost the biggest clients last month, right? So asking those questions will automatically trigger in their minds like, oh, yes, that's great. Or they'll be like, no, I already know that, or I kind of don't really care too much about it.
Yeah.
So asking them questions of potential things they might be interested in could be a good start for you.
Yeah. I love the story. So basically, they don't know what they want, and you don't know what they're looking for, what's in the data. So it's good to start with some exploration to see what's in the data, and then come back with some questions and ask them. So I think that's great advice, because a lot of people would be like, okay, you want me to find insights? I go find insights, and then spend 3 months, build some dashboard, find some insights, and then like, this is actually not interesting. So it's good. I think in the beginning, you don't have to create a perfect analysis or dashboard. It's good to ask for feedback early. And even if sometimes the audience or the stakeholder think they know what they want, it's also good to make sure what you create is what they actually wanted. Or sometimes when people change their mind, so have this type of sync up communication is very important.
Yeah, you should never go away for 3 months for any reason. You should always have that conversation. I'd say at least weekly, if not more often, depending on the project, I guess.
Yeah. So working as a data analyst, what makes a good data analyst?
I'd say a good data analyst is someone who has an understanding of the business domain that they're working in, because it goes back to the prior examples of doing analysis for the sake of doing analysis. Getting an understanding of what the business cares about and making sure that you provide the results that give them insights to make decisions in their business, but also the ability to really use some of the tools that are available in the marketplace. And it doesn't really matter as much which tool you start using, but having a good understanding of at least one tool in your little toolbox can really help you be a good data analyst, especially if you already have the understanding of the domain, you have the understanding of the data that you're working with. The tool is really there to just help you get your job done, right? So if you don't have a good understanding of the tool, chances are you might visualize something inappropriately. You could show something that is inaccurate in your visual. You can just take a lot longer to get the insights to your client, which again, it's like, why do we need you if you're not getting me insights on time when I actually need them? So being proficient in a tool is also another aspect of a good data analyst.
Yeah. So do you have any favorite tools?
Not really favorite. So I personally started my journey with Tableau, and I used Tableau more than any other tool for that reason. And it's also the tool that my organization had on hand, right? But after Tableau, I sort of picked up Power BI. I learned Click. I did a little bit of programming in R and in Python and used some of those visualization libraries just for fun. Then I got into Sisense and I explored ThoughtSpot, and there's just so many tools that I ended up exploring. So now I call myself product agnostic, because I just can't decide which tool is better. They're all really, really good. And actually Data Wrapper is also pretty cool. It's freely available and has really good default settings once you put your data in there. Simpler, very simple data visualization tool, but I like them all. It's like picking children. They're all
I really agree with you on the, you don't have to have a favorite tool. Whatever solve the problem is the best tool at hand. And you don't have to, there are so many debates online, this one is better, the other one is better. I think the one you most familiar with and can solve the problem is the best tool. And working as a data analyst, especially when you create dashboard, you get a lot of ad hoc requests, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. So how do you handle and prioritize those requests?
I've absolutely been there, especially when the organization is sort of new to dashboarding, data visualization, and they see it for the first time. Immediately, all the other departments, divisions, they're like, "Oh, I want that. Kate, Kate, give me that, but for me." And I'm like, "Yeah, great, great. I just have a job to do." But yeah, like, so my approach to this was, I was very excited when people showed an interest in moving their, let's say, Excel reports into, some sort of BI software. And what I ended up doing was training them. So I would show them it's really not that difficult. Get a version of, a desktop, a Tableau desktop or Power BI, and let me just show you how you can get to where I am with your data. So again, going back to the screen call, share your screen, open up the thing, and let's put your data in there. Sort of giving them a maybe 10-15 minute walkthrough of getting started and how you can visualize your data yourself really helped me. And it also helped that most people in the organization sort of knew, how to use these tools and they were tech savvy. I can imagine in other organizations where you're probably, maybe the only one who knows how to use this tool, and you don't really have people as excited as you to learn this. And then you're getting ad hoc requests. At that point, it goes to prioritization in terms of, what does your manager want you to work on? What do
Yeah.
are you handling your own workload first before you're handling all these ad hoc reports? But then for me personally, it never took too much time to build the reports. As long as the data was in the structure and format that I needed it to be in, that whole drag, drop, and clicking and formatting the report was pretty much the easy part. So it never took too long. And then once they're built, the maintenance of it was also pretty efficient because you can refresh reports fairly easily in Tableau.
Yeah. So basically, if you get those requests from other department, you don't have to do all the work. You can train them,
Yeah.
right? And if it's not maybe from some other team member, someone have additional question, it's always good to communicate with your manager to realign on the priorities instead of taking on every request and overwhelm yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Just tell your manager, hey, this division's been reaching out. What are my next steps here? Most of the time, people were good about going straight to the manager and saying, that this individual have the bandwidth to help me with this project? And then sort of having that open communication was really helpful.
Yeah. And what if your CEO say, hey, Kate, and then it's like, 10 p.m. Can you give me this? Can you give me that? And then, I guess once in a while you have those fire drills. I think it's okay as long as it doesn't happen all the time and they're, aware of those, how it impact you. But what if it happens a lot? How do you handle those?
Yeah, well, first I'll say I'm so happy I am my own CEO these days because now I don't have to tell myself to do anything at 10 p.m. But I can tell you that there have been times that I've had to do work at 1 a.m., not to 10
Wow.
p.m. Yes, and it was this goes back to my consulting days where the client would just say, we need this and we need this now, and it is 1 a.m. and you're sitting there in an office and you're working. And it all goes back to setting expectations early on for yourself. Now, there might be times when you really have to just power through and maybe take care of an urgent task. But especially after I had kids, I prioritized my time in a much more efficient way where I would simply not work after 5 or 6 p.m. And, if I don't see my email, then I didn't see it at 10 p.m. That means I'll see it in the morning and I'll take care of it the next day.
Yeah.
So I think identifying that early on with where, the manager where you work and making sure that, these are the set hours that I'm available, and agreeing that this is mutually that it works for both parties is important. Not to say that you shouldn't take an urgent request when it's truly urgent, but more times than not, those urgent requests could wait till the next day. No, most of us are not in the business of saving lives. At least I wasn't. And then it took me a while to realize, I'm like, all I had to do was edit a PowerPoint deck. Like if I didn't do that, nobody would have died. Like it would have been fine if I did this tomorrow. But I took it so seriously because we all have this desire to be, to be good at whatever it is you do and to be the go-to person. But life is too short. So enjoy your life and don't work at 10 p.m. if you really can avoid it.
Yeah, I love it. So I agree with what you just said. Once in a while, there might be some urgent requests, but it's not worth it to do that every day. And it's important to have that boundary set up with your manager and stick to it.
Yes.
And so if you were to hire a data analyst specifically working on data visualization, what type of qualities are you looking for?
I would be looking for someone who's open to feedback and can improve on their visualization by taking feedback, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of times people who like to visualize data are creative individuals, and they think that, if I created this is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
So I think what I'd be open to is, somebody who wants to improve every time, even though they think they're really good at this. So open to feedback is probably one of the top areas. If I say, maybe this color works better, not having them say no. I like hot pink across the board. Like we must have hot pink and green mixed in together. Um, and then, really being sort of a creative individual to begin with. So tweaking it and never really being happy with how things look to begin with, and always thinking about when the audience sees this for the first time, are they going to understand it? Maybe somebody who goes the extra length and shows it to his friends or colleagues and says, hey, what does this look like to you? Can you right away understand what I'm trying to show you? And trying to simplify and make the visualizations and dashboards as straightforward and quick to understand as possible. Um, and also, just somebody fun to work with. I think again, life is too short. So I when I'm hiring, I'm always looking for people I can actually have a conversation with outside of work. Just because people like people, and it helps when people like each other and they work together.
Yeah. And, it's surprising because I was expecting, oh, maybe you want to look for some technical quality, but you're actually looking for those leadership skills, those
Yeah.
soft skills, which I think is the most important thing, or, one of the most important things, being a data analyst or anyone working in tech.
Yeah, the technical skills for me, I feel like they are easier to learn, and it's easier to find an individual that has the technical know-how. We can watch, so you take some courses and learn how to click on a screen and drag and drop fields and write some code. And I'm not, saying that those things come easy, but I do feel like it's a little bit easier for individuals to learn that than having let's say a good personality, right? Or somebody
Mm,
that you can talk to and can take feedback and can present well or has good communication skills. I
yeah.
think those things are just a little bit more difficult for people to just learn, as opposed to the technical. The technical is
Yeah.
still important, right? I
Mhm.
don't I don't want people clicking around there for hours if they're just trying to create one chart. I guess my assumption was that the individual already has the technical skills.
Right. It's already assumed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to be good at your technical skills and also pleasant to work with, open to feedback. And a lot of people working in the data field, we feel, oh, I'm an introvert. I'm not, a party person. I don't know how to do small talk. So how can I become the person that other people enjoy working with if I'm introvert?
Yeah, I don't know if it has anything to do with introvert or extrovert. I personally believe I am an introvert or used to be. I think I'm maybe fluid between those two. And sometimes,
Ambivert.
yeah, I don't know exactly. And I think being a nice person to work with goes a lot further than just being a social person. I've worked
Mhm.
with some people who, were not as outgoing. They're not like laughing all the time and having a great time at work. They're just very serious. They're good at what they do,
Yeah.
but they're nice. They're just nice people, and they say please and thank you. It's like really the simple things that we're taught as children of what it means to be a nice individual. They're helpful, and they don't say no, I can't help you with this because I have all these other projects. Um, Basically, as long as they're respecting their own time, going out of their way to also help other people who are struggling. And it's a little bit hard to say like, oh, this is a nice person but this is not. But once you're talking to somebody, you sort of had this, it's like a feeling like, you
Yeah.
feel like you want to work with this person, or you feel like, no, I don't think we're going to get along well because,
Mm.
this person's just mean. So it's hard to put like an actual description on it.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it's more like intuition. Also, those the small things, like you said, say thank you, or when you push back,
Yeah.
don't just say no. Give other people personal reason and say, hey, maybe when I have time, I can help you, or here are some resources that you can use. Maybe let me know if you have some other questions, right?
Yeah.
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 So for data analytics or visualization, what are some misconceptions you think a lot of people have?
Misconceptions about data visualization. I
Mhm.
think a lot of times people go into data analytics and this whole space thinking that they have to be really good at like complicated math,
Yeah.
which is simply not the case. I personally didn't do that well, like in calculus and stuff. And I've never had to use calculus again. By the way.
Mm.
Like after I took it in college, never once did I have to do any of that stuff. Or most of the math I learned, it's really just the basic math that you can probably do on a simple calculator that we end up working with. So I think that's a common misconception. The other one is, people say, I'm not a creative person, so I can't visualize data. And I try to dispel that myth because I think even if you believe that you're not a creative person, even though visualization is sort of like an art, it's also partly a science because there's sort of an algorithm that you can follow to create a visually appealing data visualization. You can make sure that the colors are working properly with the visual that you're trying to display. You can make sure that the font is, large enough for people to read and sized accordingly. The title being the larger font, the subtitles slightly smaller. So there's sort of this recipe book that you can follow to make sure that you follow this checklist of did I have a color legend next to my chart that I use as color, and really going through those steps, even if you're not a super creative person, can still help you build a visually appealing data visualization.
Yeah, those are great points. And in your career, what was some project you did that you're very proud of, had very high impact from a dashboard?
Yeah, it was actually a pretty simple project. I'll try to explain it. So the organization I worked for, they gave everyone, it's sort of like a personality test, and you can be one of four things, right? I won't mention the four things, but basically four different personalities: A, B, C, or D. And every time a new batch of employees joined, maybe a few hundred people, they would all take this personality test as a big group. This is pre-COVID, when people can actually meet together in large groups. And so the visualization I designed was very simple. It was like a circular image that had sort of a graph like that on it that would plot the individuals based on their personalities, right? There's four quadrants. If you're personality A, your dot would be here with your name on it.
Mm.
And visually it was very simple. It had the four colors on there, but it was very powerful because once everyone took that assessment, they would share this on this really, really big screen, and you could see yourself and you're like, oh wow, okay, so this is my personality, and this person here, is very similar to me. So I'm going to go and reach out and say, hey.
Uh,
And like this personality test was a very big deal for this company. So
Yeah.
I felt proud because it was one of my first visualizations that I built. I actually thought I was building this as part of like training. I didn't think it was actually going to be used in real life, but apparently it ended up being used across the entire organization. And again, it goes back to how simple it was for people to use and how simple it was for people to understand. So that was probably my proudest data viz.
Yeah. And what are some mistakes you made in your career, or the biggest one?
Yeah, mistakes are plenty. So first off, I would accept all the default settings when I just started. So whatever the data viz tool spit out, I put in front of the client, and they sort of accepted it. But over time, when I learned visual best practices, I would make these little tweaks. And I still remember the manager there. He was like, Kate, I don't know what you're changing every time I see this, but it looks better and better every time. And I'm like, okay. So, that was one of my mistakes. I'd say a bigger mistake I made was not understanding the data properly. So I didn't take the time to sit down and understand all the important values, right? Like, for example, what should be the total revenue around, should it be 5 million or $5 billion? So when I put this dashboard out there, what happened was some of the data somehow got duplicated over and over again. I think it was 4 times. So all the numbers I put in front of people were inflated at least 4 times than what they were supposed to be. And to me, it looked fine because I didn't really have that baseline to work with. I didn't spend the time up front. But to the client, they were like, what are you showing me? This is completely wrong. None of this is right. And I mean, it's embarrassing, but it's something that I learned, like really make sure that the numbers actually make business sense, not just sense in the case of like number A is bigger than B, and is that good or bad, but is it even close to the ballpark or what they're expecting to see?
Yeah. I think we all have made those type of mistakes in our career, and it's important to, like you said, know the ballpark, have some sort of a baseline, have some type of a type of sanity check, right?
Yeah. I'd love to hear from you. What's your biggest mistake you've made?
Ooh, I think some big mistake I made was also not getting feedback early. I think I was when I started in Amazon, I was a business intelligence engineer, and I was, I think, presenting some results, but I didn't pay attention to, what's on the x-axis, y-axis, and I thought it would tell the story, but it actually very confusing. And also, I think I didn't prepare for people's questions. When people look at your analysis, they always ask questions. I learned how to anticipate people's questions. So when they ask, oh, what does this mean? Have you thought about that? I don't really have an answer. And I think it's okay that you don't always have an answer, but if it's something so obvious on the chart, especially executives care about if there's a spike or if there's a dip, maybe they didn't ask you to explain things like that when they give you the task, but they will always ask. So when I say, oh, hey, why there's a drop? I was like, I don't know. I can't go home, look at that. But those are the things I later learned. They will always ask. So be prepared if you see some type of trend unexpected. Try to think from the perspective of your manager before you present the result to them. And also, maybe the executives are very busy. They can't give you some feedback before the final big meeting, but you can find someone that work very closely with them to get their perspective. Hey, do you have any feedback? So it's better to work with the person or someone that we're close to before the meeting. So the final big meeting shouldn't be the first time everybody see your analysis.
Yeah, you don't want to give people a big surprise like that.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I can see you're a very good communicator, and it's very important to communicate well as a data analyst. So how did you learn those communication skills?
Yeah, so for communication skills, I used to be extremely shy. I actually still remember even podcasting, right? My very first podcast interview, I was so nervous. I almost canceled like 5 minutes before the session. And it was a person, I think I was the first podcast guest on his podcast. It was like a very, very, I don't want to say unimportant, but it was not as important as you would think it is. But I would get so nervous that I'm like, no, I'm just going to cancel. I'm glad I didn't, because now I got so comfortable. I can literally wake up in the morning and just, yes, hi, let's talk. I don't really, but I think what helps is practice and just constantly talking about the topics that you want to be good at talking about. So for me, it was data visualization. And what helped me a lot was I started a YouTube channel where I would teach people different data concepts, even if it was like how to use Tableau or Click or Power BI, or some best practices, or why you should use a bar chart instead of a pie chart, and trying to explain that to an audience of maybe one, or maybe even just yourself on camera in the beginning. But the more you do this, it just becomes, you just become more comfortable with doing that. Especially if, if you really want to improve fast, then I'd say ask for feedback from maybe individuals who are good communicators and say, hey, what would you improve on this presentation? And don't send them a 45-minute presentation, send them like a 2-3 minute clip of you really in the middle of explaining something, and see what they tell you. In addition to that, so I did study communication in college, and that provided a lot of different tips, especially in presenting in big crowds. And then having again that experience of I used to present at conferences before COVID, so that also, it's always this like really exciting moment when you're standing in front of a crowd and you deliver your presentation. I think one other thing that really helps is knowing the stuff that you're going to talk about. Sometimes people prepare notes for themselves. Sometimes people prepare a whole script that they try to read or memorize. And that has never worked for me. If I even wrote out a script and then, I gave the presentation, during my talk, I would always start thinking, oh man, I wanted to say it this way. I had it worded perfectly, right? And it didn't come out the way I wanted. So that sort of throws you off. So I think high level bullet points can help you provide that guide, those guideposts for that presentation, but definitely avoid scripting your notes there.
Yeah. I absolutely love how you try to practice by teaching other people. So a lot of people think people become YouTubers because they're good at communication. It's actually the other way around. You want to get good at something, so you do more of it. I think that's a very inspiring story. And I would like to share a story of a mentor of mine. He is also a great storyteller. And he told me that in the beginning, he was also very shy, doesn't know how to present, but he has kids. And then he volunteered in his kids' school to teach kids about some small things, some science, some technology, because kids don't care. And the kids also have very short attention span. So you have to make it interesting and engaging. I think that's very creative. And I think there are a lot of ways around us that can help us practice communication. And if you don't have an audience, you don't have kids, you can maybe ask your friends, hey, if you want to learn some data analytics, or this is something I do, I can teach you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then gradually with those opportunities, or sign up for a conference, not because you're good at, just because you want to learn. And it's like a muscle, and later on you become a better communicator.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the story about the kids. I actually, when my oldest daughter was she was 3 or 4 years old, they asked for parents to come in and talk about careers. It was like a career day. And my husband's also in data. So the two of us went to present on data analytics to 3 and 4-year-olds. And I'll tell you briefly, we decided to use Skittles, the colorful candy, to visualize a bar chart of the kids' favorite color Skittles. So each child had to come up and get one piece of Skittles, red, yellow, green, whatever. And the trick was, they just had to hold it, and then we'd tally it up, and then they would draw a bar chart. The bad part was a lot of kids ate their Skittles before we got to count them. And other ones, they held it so tight, the colors started coming off of their hands. So I definitely recommend the experiment, but don't use Skittles with 3 and 4-year-olds. But they were really good. They all knew how to draw a bar chart. They knew exactly what they're doing. I don't know how kids already had this ability, but they were already data literate enough to put a bar chart up on the whiteboard. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. So now, we're talking about career. So what is a good career, or say as a data analyst, how do you have a successful career?
I think it depends on what you think success looks like. So for me personally, success is doing the work you actually enjoy doing and doing it on your own time. So for me, working for an organization no longer felt like success. That's why I ended up starting my own company in March 2020, so I can control my own schedule and really take on the tasks that I do best. For a data analyst, I think picking the part of the data analytics process that you enjoy the most and really becoming an expert in that space is probably the best way for you to grow a career. So
Mhm.
if you really are the best at, you have advanced Tableau skills and you're very creative, then maybe you can be a designer of cool, interactive infographics, and you're like the go-to person for that. Alternatively, if you're really good at joining data sets and you're really better and you enjoy kind of crunching data and make sure that the data is formatted and shaped correctly, then again, doubling down and making sure you're the best person who can do that for an organization,
Mhm.
then you will have that job security for the right reasons, not for the reasons of, you're hoarding a process or some data set, but for the reason that you're really just efficient and really good at what you do. But again, success could be very, very different things to different people.
Yeah.
Sometimes money is a driver, sometimes time, flexibility, or
Mhm.
where you work could be the determinant. Some people just want to work for a very specific company because that's like, they always dreamt of working for this company. So it definitely varies.
Yeah. And especially during the pandemic, I think people are reevaluating what is a successful life.
Yeah.
Um, and so now you have shift from working for a company to working on your own. How is the transition feels like?
It's the best. It's the best ever. It's the best decision I ever made. I absolutely love the journey that I'm on right now, and I love that I get to set forth my own vision for even what next month looks like, what next year looks like. Do I want to continue doing this project, or do I want to do something completely different? I've always been good at being disciplined. So for me, it was never difficult of, I don't need somebody like a manager breathing down my neck saying, is this done yet? Are you moving forward? Because I'm doing what I absolutely love to do. It sort of helps, it's like a snowball effect that helps roll everything forward.
Yeah.
Um, so the transition has been amazing.
Hmm. That's awesome. And now you are hosting a lot of conference. So what did you learn about the industry from hosting those events? What are some new trends that data analysts should pay attention to?
Yeah, I'll briefly say a bit about the conferences. I actually launched my very first conference in October 2020, and then my fourth one in October 2021. So I had about four events, four big expos conferences in the span of 1 year, and I'm learning that this data analytics, machine learning, AI space is evolving so fast that every time I talk to people, they have a new way of doing something, a cooler,
Mm,
innovative tool, and it's actually really exciting to be just even a small part of that world and you
yeah.
get to take a glimpse at everything that's happening. When I started this data visualization, data analytics journey, people are working in Excel, they're moving into BI dashboards. Now there are, platforms where you upload your data set and then they'll tell you a story. They'll just give you a narrative.
Wow.
Or there's one that actually will give you a video, an AI generated video of somebody
Mm,
explaining data analytics. Like they'll say, you upload the data and they'll say, okay, well, sales have been up 3% in region A, and it'll build a chart for you as it's giving you this audio visual interpretation. So it's definitely changing, and it's freeing up the data analyst's time from sitting and trying to visualize things and trying to write up a narrative, or even trying to understand what insights the data has. I think now we're moving towards a time where we really are just, data analysts are there to interpret some of those findings and help communicate those findings to the business, and sort of bridging that gap to make sure that everyone's on the same page with what the data is showing us.
yeah, wow, that's very exciting. I haven't heard of those type of tools
Yeah.
yet. And naturally, I have to ask a stupid question. With those very advanced tools telling stories, do you think data analysts will be obsolete?
No, absolutely not. I think we'll always have this demand for, ad hoc requests. You always have the businesses and the stakeholders that are not tech savvy. Not
Hmm.
everyone can upload a file or connect to a database and then, understanding if that data is correct or not. So you'll definitely still need the data analysts, data scientists to make sure that the data is, first of all, accurate, correct, has the right quality, provides the right insights. You'll need maintenance. I think we're very early stages. but I don't think data analysts are going away.
Yeah. And as a data analyst, how can you make your more competitive?
I think staying on top of all these trends is important, making sure you don't get blindsided when the next tool is just taking over the world and you're still working in like the older software that no one's really using yet. So I agree about being heads down and focused and learning a tool really, really well so you can be proficient. But at the same time, peek up a little bit and look around and say like, are people still using this? Because I'm really becoming really good. But if this tool is going away, making sure that you build the right relationships in your network, that you're on top of some of these trends and explore the new tools, as long as you're not getting distracted from your day-to-day. Just keep an eye out on what's happening out there.
Yeah. So just find that mix between going deep on one tool and also what is some new thing. Like we don't have to chase all the shiny new thing, but be aware of them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what are some cool things you are working on right now?
What am I working on? So I am now working on a couple of things. Right now, I'm in the middle of writing a book called Color Wise, which is essentially all about the role that color plays in data storytelling, data visualization. I want to make sure we educate the full community, the data, the business, the everyday reader on how color psychology and color, the culture can really impact people's understanding of dashboards and data visualizations, depending on how color is used there. Also addressing accessibility, like color blindness, and make sure that people can equally understand what it is that you're trying to tell them. Aside from the book, I am definitely planning more conferences, more dedicated shows, live events. I'm also in the middle of currently launching the Dedicated Circle, which is this online community, which is currently free to join, where people can come in there and discuss data topics. I plan to have job postings in there, book recommendations, mentorship. It's going to be a pretty big program. My course content from the Dedicated Academy is also going to live in that Dedicated Circle community. So I'm trying to really bring everything that I'm working on together into this one platform, and that's probably the most exciting thing. Outside of that, I have some marathons I'm running, and just continuing to work and planning for the next year.
Wow, that's really exciting. And I have to follow up on that. You mentioned the color psychology. Can you give us a few best tips on how to use color psychology?
Yeah, so there are some examples that I walk through in the book. One example is like the color, sort of yellowish orange color that you sometimes see in the stores, right? It immediately signifies like that there's a sale. So it's sort of using the psychology that humans have been working with since the beginning of time, of like triggering different things in our mind, and it's really using those inherent triggers that humans already have, and using those colors to visually demonstrate something to an individual. So in some examples, right, using specific colors will have a specific emotional response from an individual. A lot of times in most cultures, not all cultures, but in most cultures, using the color red will signify that something is not going well, right? I know in China, red is probably a good thing, but most of the the Western world, red is a bad thing. And one example I'll walk through there is a friend of mine was telling me this story. She was visualizing some data for a client, and their logo was red. Okay, so it's bright red logo, which is fine sometimes if you want to have a red logo. It can grab attention. But what she was asked to do was compare some statistics for that company and their competitors. So she put out a visualization, and the color scheme she chose was red for that company, and the competitors were blue, green, black, whatever. So every page that she showed, it ended up looking like that specific company was poorly performing against all their competitors, because it was all red.
Right.
And it's all of that, you being intentional in how you use color. And that's really the key point of the book, is getting people to be more intentional with how do you use color, and not just throw the rainbow at your dashboard and hope something works.
Yeah, wow. I never thought of it. Usually just sometimes pick the default or, red or green. That's really interesting.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Really, yeah, I should really read that book. And thanks
Especially
for,
not,
Mhm.
yeah, especially not the red and green, because
Yeah,
people who have color blindness, they actually cannot tell the difference between red and green.
yeah.
So yeah, that's,
So for people who have color blindness, what like some colors you should use?
or blue and orange is usually the go-to. So blue is
Mhm.
good, orange is bad. It's easier to differentiate for those with color blindness. It's also easier when you print something in black and white. You can
Mhm.
still see the differences usually between that blue and orange.
Yeah. So you have over 100K followers on LinkedIn. How did you build a brand on LinkedIn, and what are some of your best advice?
Yeah, so I never sought out to get followers. First of all, it was very interesting because it started when, as I mentioned, when I started learning about data visualization and Tableau, I started posting online. And I think that is what helped me start building this brand, is people started joining me on my journey. A lot of times people hesitate to put content out because they're like, oh, what do I know, I'm just starting out. But the thing is, there are so many people who are on your level that are also starting out, that want to follow that journey. They don't want to look at maybe the professional who has 25 years of experience, because they don't feel like they can relate to them. So that's how it started. And then what happened was I ended up building some real friendships with other data science, data analytics professionals. And we sort of started having these like group conversations. We started having something we called data science office hours, which was this early days live show that we did on YouTube. LinkedIn didn't even have live streaming at that point. Um, and then what other things that helped me was LinkedIn recognized me as a top voice in data science and analytics, and this was in 2018. Came completely as a big shock to me personally. I'm like, there's so many people that know so much more than me. I was really, maybe a couple years into data analytics and getting started. But I talked about it a lot. And I also had a show called Humans of Data Science, where I interviewed people from the space, either beginners or sometimes even the famous data leaders out there, for about 10-15 minutes. And I think that helped me grow my network. And it also helped others because they were able to get insights from these conversations. So, sort of one thing led to another. And then I guess more people became interested in hearing these data conversations. So they started following. But for people out there who are getting started or want to get started in building their own data communities, I'd say start where you are. Don't think that you need to, learn this special skill or learn everything you need to know about content creation. Literally, it could be as easy as putting two sentences on there with the hashtag data of whatever it is you're working on right now. Maybe ending your post with a question, a specific a question that you have for your audience. And that is exactly, what can help you get started, because then you have these real conversations, authentic conversations about the topics that really matter to you. And showing up consistently to talk about those topics is really what's going to help you grow, if growing is really the goal. In
Mhm.
some other cases, people don't want to grow a big following, but they want to build maybe closer connections with their existing audience. Again, it goes back to putting content out there, because you never know, the types of opportunities that can come your way just because you're putting out content. It is extremely powerful. And the number of opportunities that have come my way simply because I'm putting content out there, it's just unreal sometimes.
Yeah. Can you give us some examples? What type of opportunities?
Yeah, so one opportunity that came out was I was able to facilitate a course for MIT. It was,
Wow.
yeah, I know. It was just facilitation, and I was really just helping do some office hours, but they came to me because they saw content posted on
Yeah.
online. O'Reilly reached out to me to do a meet the expert session on brand building in data science, and that also came out from just me posting online. The last example I'll share is actually one of my favorites. TCS, the Tata Consulting Services company, reached out to sponsor my running the New York City Marathon, which is like a dream come true. Like now
Yeah.
I get paid to run and talk about data. Like this is just, this is just where what dreams are made of, at least for me. And it's all because I would post content out there, about data analytics and about running. So being your authentic self and putting out content consistently can just really bring a lot of opportunities your way.
Yeah, that's very inspiring. Thanks for sharing with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're doing a lot of things, running events, writing books, running marathons. So what are the things do you do outside of work? I'm trying to understand, who are you as a person?
Who am I as a person? I guess I like to run a lot. So I have two kids. That takes up most of my free time.
Yeah.
I think as a mom of younger kids, you tend to lose like some of the things that you are as a person, because now I'm like, what do I do outside of work and running? I play Monopoly. I play Clue. I listen to them read to me very, very, cool books that we have for kids. We explore things through a lot of playing with a lot of toys and dolls and teddy bears. My world is full of that kind of stuff.
That sounds fun.
Yes, I don't watch much television, so most of the shows that people are talking about, like on Netflix, I've never seen them. Like I know people are talking about Squid Game and something else and some manifest maybe, and my family's all into it, and I'm like, I have no idea.
Yeah.
So I'm very far behind in terms of watching TV. I like reading. I just wrapped up this book last night, so I like to.
What is this?
The
The
80/20
80/20
manager.
manager.
Very interesting. It's the whole principle of 80/20. Learn a lot of cool concepts from there in terms of how to work less. One thing I actually learned, especially last night, was it makes sense to be a lazy manager. And the lazy plus intelligent manager tends to get the most done. There's some like studies that they've done from other people, and I'm like, oh, okay, interesting, because it sort of made me think of myself. I feel like I'm on the lazier side, and I prioritize my personal time really high, and I think that actually helps me accomplish more in the business side of things.
Yeah. So now you're a manager, and from the perspective of a manager, what advice would you give your younger self, like as an individual contributor?
Yeah, good point. Good question there. So first to say, this is my beginning of second week of managing a team. I was running this whole thing on my own until last week. So what I learned right away is, sitting on the other side is, I guess I would wish that people are more proactive. And I think that's something I would tell my younger self, is just to be more proactive and sort of say, hey, is this good? Do you need something else? What else can I work on? Because it's those small little, even if it doesn't take much of your time, it signifies to your manager that like, wow, this is a go-getter. Like I want to work with this person. I want to give them more tasks. I want to teach them, invest in them, because it looks like they're really interested. So I think that would be the tip I give myself.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So before we wrap up, what do you think of is the future of data visualization and data analytics?
Yeah, I think I touched on it a little bit, but I think the technology that we're seeing these days is really going to speed up the process of going from data to insight. I think business leaders are going to be more data literate. They're going to understand what different charts mean without much explanation. I think the technology is also going to bridge that gap and make it easier for them to understand. I think we're going to have even more data democratization. We're going to have people really getting access to data on a more frequent basis. I have also seen other innovations of like virtual reality. So I attended one conference where they gave me like these VR goggles, and I was able to almost touch a scatter plot, like you're within a scatter plot. So that was pretty cool. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some of those advancements.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for people who want to follow you online, attend a conference, what is the best way to find you?
Yeah, I think in the meantime, LinkedIn is probably still the best place to find me. So if you look for Kate Strachnyi, I do believe I'm the only one with that name on there. Maybe there's another one at this point, but if in doubt, look for the word dedicated or go to dedicated.com, and you'll be able to find a way to either join the community or sign up for any upcoming LinkedIn live shows or conferences.
Yeah, well, this is a great conversation. I learned so much from you about data visualization, the color science. Thank you for coming to the show, Kate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.